overnight and was unable to make the meeting today, but his clarification would have helped here. I might, from staff's perspective, recommend that all three items get moved to April if possible. And the reason being is that I understand that two of the permits, the homeowner has agreed to sign the acceptance of the notice on title. And the third one, they're replacing the permit, but I don't know which file is which. And that's what Chris would have been able to help with. So it might be good, rather than doing something we have to backtrack on, to refer to April so we can get the three files sorted appropriately.
Maybe
Chair, that's exactly
okay.
That's exactly what I was prepared to do, because we don't have clarity. Don't want to get into a situation where we have to undo something because of confusion or lack of staff information and input. So I'd like to move all three of these to April RAC. If I have to do them individually, I'll refer them individually.
We're in committee, so we can do as a block. You want to refer items 7.2, and 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4 to April Rural Affairs.
Yes,
Do we
please.
have a second for referral? Second. Propriety referral, I think CAO's already covered that. We want to make sure there's no errors made here. So I'll just go to a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? So those three will be referred. I'm going to take a little liberty as chair here because I had a few comments on this. We were asked to increase the taxation for this service this year, and I think First Director Davidoff said we should pull from the Compensation Stabilization Fund, and then we were still asked to increase this. And I said we need to pull further. Our direction to staff has been that we are delivering a service that should be user pay based. These situations are the furthest from user pay we can possibly get. There are no fees, there are no permits, and staff are continuing to spend an extraordinary amount of time on these, referring month to month to month. Our time, their time, and the public's time as they sit here where they have paid for a permit and they want to proceed with their work as user pay under the user pay model. So thoughts, I don't want to have a debate today and it's not properly on the agenda. As I say, I'm taking liberty, but maybe we need a little policy around this. We are referring some of these, it seems, ad infinitum, at the expense of the people who have honestly taken out and paid for a permit and want service delivery. And we're not always at the peak of performance on service delivery. Something that maybe we'll put on agenda for a future item. Procedural, yes.
I won't comment because we could definitely dive into that at another time. But I did want to note Isaac Maxfield from Castle Infonet Society has joined the meeting, and that's one of our community groups applications.
Oh.
So I believe, just as a heads up to you, Chair, if there are questions, we do have the component.
You'd be able to explain that. Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
So we then have referred 7.2, 7.3, 7.4. We'll move on to item 7.5. Is a development variance permit. That's Horvath and Dolovote. This is electoral area J, Broadwater Road. The staff recommendation is that we approve the development variance permit. So we have the proponent for that one in the room or online? Online.
Yep, hello.
So, and that's, who is it? Michael online?
Jonas.
Or
My name's
Jonas?
Jonas.
Oh, sorry, I went and flipped the page now. Sorry, Jonas Horvath. So we have the report. Everyone's looked at it. We know what the staff recommendation is. You're certainly welcome to add new information if you have anything to add, or if you prefer, you could simply answer questions from committee members. The floor is yours.
Sorry, when you say the report, do you have the letter that was included in with my development variance application, the permit application?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
We have the letter.
Give the-
From the neighbor.
Oh, the neighbor's letter?
No, not the neighbor's letter. When I initially applied for the variance, for the development variance permit, I had included a letter just giving a quick rundown of the decisions that were made, the regret that we feel, and a little bit of an explanation just to give a brief rundown to you guys.
Stephanie, is there other information?
Through the chair, that letter as part of the application was not included as an attachment. So Mr. Horvath could speak to the content of that letter since he's at the meeting, if he wishes.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Jonas?
Yeah, so just in the fall of 2020, we had applied for a building permit for our shop and had expected to have it approved following not typical procedure, but just due to the weather constraints, we had started our excavation and our forming prior to obtaining the building permit, which is not extremely uncommon, as the building permit will sometimes allow us to do that. Obviously not pouring concrete until things have been confirmed for situations like this. So there's reasons why it's advised against, but again, the excavation typically isn't a problem. Again, we did receive that rejection kind of late in the process, and due to needing a variance permit for the overheight, regretfully, just with COVID happening at the same time, and we'd scheduled our employees, well, not scheduled, but we'd been forced out of some houses due to that the pandemic at the time. We had a lull in our schedule, and made the decision to keep them employed and keep their pay going and doing something productive by building our shop. Again, this isn't our typical protocol, and we do prefer to, and have definitely learned from this mistake, and this isn't the way that we will ever proceed in the future. But did decide to continue to build. Obviously, yeah, it went up. We got the stop work order once it was complete, and stopped work at that time. And again, now we're going through things in the reverse direction, trying to get that variance permit now. Like I mentioned, that's not the way that we typically operate. We feel like our hands were a little bit tied with the pandemic at the time, and really we do have a bit of an obligation, not an obligation, but we strongly feel for the families of our employees and wanting to make sure that they could continue working through that time, even though we weren't able to be in people's houses. And again, made that decision regretfully, and are hoping to see this through in following the appropriate channels this time.
Okay, thank you for that background. Any questions from the committee for the proponent, the applicant?
No, I will say I did see the letter and appreciate sort of the apology and remorse for not following the proper procedure. Yes, we all make mistakes. Sometimes it's how you deal with it after that will define you. So if there's no discussion, I can move the motion or the recommendation.
We'll just be sure if there's no other questions for the applicant. Seeing none, thanks very much for giving the background, and we will now move into the business part where we won't ask any more questions. Any other questions from the committee members for staff, and or go ahead and move the recommendation if you like.
I'll move.
Sure.
You want me to read it out?
No.
Move the recommendation then.
So to approve the development variance permit, and that's to do with the building height.
Overheight.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yes,
I'll second.
it's more than just the building height, it's also the
Yes.
gross floor.
And the floor area to the extra square meter. So you're seconding that, Director
Yeah.
Vandenberg? Discussion? I've noted in some of our communities, a lot of the buildings have had variances for overheight. Maybe the OCP and the basic parameters should be modified instead of continual variances. We actually had a chart drawn up once, Director Cunningham might remember, of how many applications were made in some communities for variances. Seeing no further discussion on the recommendation, we'll go to a vote. All in favor? Anyone opposed? So that is carried. That will go to board tomorrow as well. Thank you. As I said to the other who are in the room, Mr. Horvath, you can stay on if you want, or you can go about the rest of your day. That recommendation will go to the board meeting tomorrow for an official vote or ratification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
7.6, site-specific exemption to floodplain management bylaw. That's Drysdale in electoral area A. We do have John and Bradley Drysdale in the room here. Is a recommendation to approve. So welcome. Again, as I said to the previous application or the previous item, we have the report. We see the recommendation from the local planning committee commission. Is there anything you want to add to information that's in the report, or would you just simply like to answer any questions if there are?
I feel that the report is pretty clear, but if there's any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, so to the committee, questions to the applicant? So seeing none, that's fairly painless. If you wouldn't mind returning to the gallery, then we will vote on the application. Okay, thanks, John. Some get debated and some don't. So this is area A, but questions for staff, or does anyone want to move the recommendation? It's moved, seconded.
And I have a question for staff.
And go ahead, Chair Watson.
Thank you. So the question through to staff is on both the floodplain exemptions. It's not specific to the applicants. It's that they're both, the response from Ministry of Forests. Is Sangeeta there? I just want to make sure she's there.
She's there.
Thank you. They're both referencing the riparian area regulation as being enforceable in the Kootenays. And that confuses me because my understanding is that it's not. And I would like clarification on that. And we don't have to get into the whole DPA conversation, but that's where I need clarification. How can the Ministry of Forests enforce the riparian area regulation in the Kootenays? And yet it doesn't apply in the Kootenays. Do we know?
Manager Sedan.
So through the chair, I would refer that back to Stephanie. I'm not sure what that comment was related to. She might, if she's the planner on the file, she may be able to answer that.
It's Zach.
For Zach on this one.
Zach, yeah, sorry. Zach, go ahead, Zach.
And Zach,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Thanks. Through the chair, the responses that we get from Ministry of Water, Lands and Resource Stewardship, I think that's the comments that are being referred to. Actually, no, there's responses from Ministry of Forests and Ministry of Water, Lands Stewardship. So could I just clarify, Director Watson's, if the question was about the Ministry of Water, Lands, Resource Stewardship or Ministry of Forests Crown Land Authorizations comments?
They're both indicating in two separate floodplain exemption applications that the riparian area regulation is applied in the Kootenays. And that's what I'm seeking clarification on. We've been told it does not apply to the Kootenays.
Right. Yeah. So
Just pause
through
for
the chair,
second.
yeah.
Let's
Kind of follow.
Director Newell. Sure. For clarification, you have a question?
Well, I'm looking at Ministry of Forest Crown Land Authorization and it mentions riparian nowhere. So I'm not sure what we're talking about. Sorry to interrupt. I'd like to follow along.
I can respond.
Go ahead, and then we'll go back to Zach in a minute. Go ahead, Director Watson.
So specifically on this report, and it's repeated in another report, so that's what I'm referencing to, is that the staff report indicates that the Ministry of Forests and staff, sorry, that was me just saying all the other things they manage, says that the riparian area regulation is in effect for streams, which I thought was not enacted in the Kootenay region. So that's my question, is I'm just clarifying this regulation.
I don't see it in their comments.
It's
Sorry.
up on page 7.
It's part of the referral
So
comment.
that's under water lands.
Ministry of Water, Lands.
Forest. Okay. And I see it there, okay.
Good point. Point three.
Yeah, so I could speak to that.
Go ahead.
So the responses that we get from Ministry of Water, Lands and Resource Stewardship, which is included at the bottom of page 7 in the referral responses, those are generic comments that they submit to for every development application that I've received over the past year or so. Basically, what they've identified is they don't have the capacity to review every individual application that they're receiving. So this is kind of like just a generic response that they've drafted as an agency, and they provide the same response to potentially different local governments. But we definitely receive the same set of 10 points on most development applications that we refer to Water, Lands, Resource Stewardship. So that might be why they're just kind of more generic and high level and speak to things that don't necessarily apply to the RDCK specifically.
And perhaps their out is the state local governments listed in section 2.1 of the RAPR are required to ensure, and we're not one of those local governments listed. It's very generic. Chair Watson.
I'll just say procedurally, it's not specific to this application. I just noted in several applications, so I'll take it offline to clarify. And if we are receiving those referral comments that are not applicable to the applicant, it is misleading. So we need to let them know they need to be a little more specific. But it's not to this application, so I'm fine with this application. We just need to be clear about what they're saying, and they should be too. And it's unfortunate we have to tell them, please correct your statements if they're not accurate.
Yeah, or be specific, or have the capacity to enable them to be specific. Further discussion around the recommendation or questions for staff? So it's moved, seconded, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? So that will go to the board tomorrow as well for the board decision. Thank you for stopping in. We will go to item 7.7, site-specific floodplain exemption. This is Pila and Crotty, electoral area E on Highway 31. There is a recommendation to approve the site-specific exemption and reduce from 15 meters to 11.42. And on that one, we have Mike is in online. Okay. So you have Mr. Crotty, I hope that's the correct way to pronounce it. If you want, you can add information. Again, we have a staff report. We have the background. Is there anything you'd like to add around the application or answer questions?
Sure, we have Deb Wheeland here as well.
And Deb Wheeland. So thank you. So either, please go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, we've contracted Deb Wheeland to be our project manager on this. She has the expertise in it more so than I, so I'll let Deb speak to that.
So, go ahead if you want to add anything, or would you prefer to just answer questions?
You know, the report is comprehensive. The staff
You're
is,
very quiet. Can you move closer to your mic?
yes, I can. Is that better?
Yes, it is.
So the staff has done a good job in preparing the report. We agree with what they are recommending. We've already consulted with our septic engineer and with the recommendation to approve in the covenant area. I have no objections to that. So I have nothing further to add, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer it.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the committee for the applicant? Just checking Director David up online. No questions from the committee. I guess it's reasonable. Go ahead, Director Graham. Okay, so I was just going to say thank you for being present as a delegation. We will now move to the business part, so we won't have any questions. So Director Graham, move staff recommendation. Do we have a second? Director Hanegraaff, discussion. Yes, Chair Watson.
Thank you. And I apologize to my colleagues. I'm not necessarily picking on your applications for your areas, but because we are doing a lot of work around development permits, as I read these reports, there's things that I'm needing to clarify. So I have several questions, if you permit me, Chair.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you. And sorry, I can't see Sangeeta or whoever wrote the report. Oh, you're right there. I can
Yes,
see you.
Stephanie.
So my first questions, are these applications referred to the Indigenous nations as our development permits are, or only when the development permit application is submitted does that get referred?
In accordance with our planning fees and procedures bylaw by application type, the site-specific floodplain exemption applications are not referred to First Nations. However, I think under the development proposal section of the staff report, we talk about should the board support the site-specific floodplain exemption, then staff would begin processing the watercourse development permit area. So it's a concurrent application. We have that application in, but to avoid kind of processing the two applications at the same time without knowing the outcome here, we're awaiting the decision at the board table before we begin processing. So part of that watercourse development permit application process would include referral to First Nations.
Okay, so supplemental to that
Yes.
one, I'm just going to flag that one because I think when it comes to the archaeological flag and then what we're assessing, if it's limited to development permits, it's not actually comment on some of the actual construction. And so I think we might get despairing comments that aren't related to what we can report out. So that's just a procedural flag, not specific to this one. The next question is regarding flooding with damage. I'm pretty sure there was a note in the report that indicated if there is flooding that causes damage, there could be economic impacts. I'm assuming that's to the applicant, not to the regional district, because at that point, the covenant would be signed identifying this, correct?
Through the chair, that would be correct. Yes.
Okay. And again, two more. Are the MODI requirements, Ministry of Transportation, are those verified through the process? It's similar to a building permit needs to verify with IHA that the septic is approved. Are the MODI requirements also then checked before a permit is provided?
Through the chair, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure requirements are in addition to regional district approval for a site-specific floodplain exemption. So MOTI would need to consider issuance of a highway access permit. So they have their own approval mechanisms and functions that would be necessary for the property owner to go through separately with the province, MOTI specifically in this case.
Okay, I mean, one last one.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
connected to that, I'm curious about the things that have been identified, including, I should have also included to be more concise, the geotech report that's recommended. I'm just curious how we vet those to ensure that when we give the permit for the floodplain exemption, that all of those criteria have been met. And I'm just curious where those fall in. We're requiring a geotech report to ensure that when the footings are actually done, that they've been further verified as stable. So do we also then have to check that that was done and that that report was clear?
Through the chair, just a point of clarification, I'm looking at on page 7 of the staff report, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure's comments, and I'm just parachuting in now. I'm looking for that geotech requirement, and I'm wondering if that's MOTI or are you referring to building?
If I may, Chair.
Yeah.
It was in the professional report. I don't recall who wrote it, but it was in the attached report that indicates for them to say this is in good, whatever the language is, that they're signing off saying that, yes, this is
Suitable
good.
for intended use.
Thank you. That report included, and when you dig, you have to also do a geotech assessment. So I'm just wondering where that check comes in place.
Through the chair, that check would come into place through the building permit process as well and our inspection process.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, no, that's good.
Takes me years to
Follow
understand
through the order of
process.
things.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
or
Chair,
Discussion, go
David
ahead.
Off.
Go ahead,
staff.
David Off. Yes,
Yeah, thank you, Chair Watson, for raising those process questions. It's really, I think it helps inform our decision making at this table when we have all of the information from all of the agencies and all of the referral information comes in, First Nations and everyone. We have one application we're dealing with right now that has been held up because of a First Nations referral, and every other agency and everybody else said, yeah, let's proceed to public hearing on a matter. But we have deferred. Staff has deferred public hearing because of the First Nations requesting more time to do an assessment. So here we have not heard from First Nations. I think we need to be respectful. We have signed on to the TRC recommendations. We have signed on to the legislation, but yet we're going to go ahead and make a decision without a response from First Nations. So if staff could please explain why we're doing that. And it has nothing to do with the merits of this application. It has to do with the process piece that Chair Watson started.
Stephanie, are you able to comment on that?
Through the chair, I think I noticed our general manager.
Or Sangita?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, General Manager Sudan. We'll venture a little bit sideways here. Go ahead.
Yes, through the chair. I guess I'm seeking a little bit of clarification from Director Davidoff. And I'll start by just saying that legislatively, we're required to refer certain land use applications. And if the board chooses to, through the Local Government Act, if the board chooses to refer other applications like the floodplain bylaw application to First Nations, then we just have to check on whether or not that's legislatively even something that we are required to do, or if we did do that as per board direction, that it would be something that we could legally do. So we'd have to check on that. Ultimately, it would be a decision of the board if they wanted us to, as part of the Truth and Reconciliation process, refer all applications. There's a capacity issue as well with First Nations in reviewing every application. I know with some applications, they want to look at them. So if that's something that's desired, then we can look into that a little bit more in detail and provide information in the future.
Okay, supplemental, Chair.
Yes, then after that, I have Director Cunningham. Go ahead, Director Davidoff.
Yeah, so on this application, I heard staff say, I think Chair Watson asked, and I heard staff say that there is being a referral being made to First Nations. Am I incorrect in that?
Stephanie.
Oh, if I could
Through the chair, to clarify, this is the first step in a two-step application process. So the applicants have applied for both a site-specific floodplain exemption and then a watercourse development permit application, which has a delegated approval authority under our planning procedures and fees bylaw. And so the first step would be the board's consideration of the site-specific floodplain exemption. And if the board were not to support the site-specific floodplain exemption for the floodplain setback to Kootenay Lake, then the watercourse development permit area application would be redundant, and we would work with the applicant on perhaps a new application or refunding their watercourse development permit application fee. So this is the first step in the application process. As part of the watercourse development permit application process, we would be referring out to the relevant archaeological branch with our comments and working with any related impacts to local First Nations. So that's a separate application, which we haven't undertaken yet, and the board's consideration of this particular site-specific floodplain proposal.
So Chair, if you bear with
Yes.
me, I have one more question. You allowed the Chair 4 questions, so
Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
Yes, I am counting. No, go ahead, Director Davidoff.
I think I'm up to 3 if I'm counting correctly.
2.5.
So basically, there was discussion here of a geotechnical report. Would that be part of the second process or part of this first process?
Through the chair, the geotechnical report really speaks to the request by the property owners to reduce the floodplain setback from Kootenay Lake.
But that would be a building permit issue down the road.
Yeah,
Through the
I get.
chair, the geotechnical report is tied to this particular application for the site-specific floodplain exemption. The geotechnical report also has relevance to the building permit application, and should the board support this setback exemption from Kootenay Lake, then staff would be processing the watercourse development permit application. So they're all inherently linked throughout the different phases, but at this particular stage, the geotechnical report is related to the site-specific floodplain setback exemption request.
And Chair, my 4th and last question, I promise.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Through staff, through the Chair to staff. So are we missing any relevant information to be able to inform our vote on this application at this time?
Through the chair to Director Davidoff, in my professional opinion, at this stage for this particular application, I do not believe the Rural Affairs Committee is missing any information to consider the site-specific floodplain exemption request.
Thank you, Chair. I'll stop there.
Okay, I will go to Director Cunningham and then Vandenberg. Go ahead, Director Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that when we send out these things, we have a little note in the bottom asking all the various agencies to reply within 30 days. Now, if they don't reply, we assume that their interests are unaffected. Sometimes they reply interests not affected, and sometimes they do reply. With things such as First Nations, which I know have sort of a
depending upon the First Nation, somewhat a variable kind of response to these things. I think we're caught between a rock and a hard place with next, because if they wait till 45 days or 60 days or 90 days before they reply, does that mean sorry?
Yeah, I have two staff members wanting to answer, and I think there can be extensions as well, but Zach and then maybe Stephanie to follow up. Go ahead, Zach. Did you have your hand up? Or not?
It's in chat.
Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thanks. It might be a bit late now, but I think I just wanted to clarify. I think the application that Director Davidoff was speaking of earlier that required First Nation consultation was a rezoning application, which under our procedures bylaw does require, referral and consultation with First Nations, whereas as Sangeeta already indicated, for floodplain exemptions, it's not required. So that would be why there's just some discrepancy between those two applications.
Stephanie, did you want to add to that, or?
Thanks. Through the chair, not to add to it, but for clarification, for those application types, we do refer to First Nations. As mentioned, oftentimes there's capacity issues, and it's not uncommon for particular First Nations to reach out saying, thank you for your referral. We're requesting an extension to the referral period, and they'll give a date. Most often staff are comfortable with the proposed extension. It doesn't impact our talking per se.
Okay, thank you. Further, Director Cunningham?
Well, that's the question here. I just want to know how we dealt with those kinds of things. The replies were not received, and we react to staff indication. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Director Vandenberg.
Thank you through the chair to the staff. Okay, so I'm not real clear. Is First Nations consultation required for floodplain? Number one. Number two, is it up to this group to determine whether or not it ought to go to First Nations? And then the third point to that is, I would think through the provincial archaeology branch, that process would occur organically on its own. So can you help me clarify those 3 points?
Through the chair, I'm looking at my virtual screen just because I don't have a computer in front of me to read or quote our planning procedures and fees bylaw. I'm wondering if our manager Nelson White might be able to speak to that.
Or we may not have to resolve all of these questions today. I guess the key for this is Indigenous referral is not required for this specific item. But if briefly, Manager White, if you wanted to speak very briefly to where it is required, that's the question.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I can follow up with Director Vandenberg on those specific application types that it's required, but as you stated, it is not required for the floodplain applications.
Sorry.
Development permits.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, development permits are referred. Some applications are, some aren't.
Supplement.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you wanted to capture this somehow with some, maybe a brief staff report just to refresh on this, but go ahead with your supplemental.
That would be awesome. But I did, and correct me if I'm wrong, clarity, Stephanie, but I did hear you say the second step would wrap in First consultation, which is in conflict to what I'm hearing right now. So I'm confused. Is First Nations being wrapped in on this second step or otherwise? I'm hearing it's not necessary.
Through the chair, there are 2 separate applications. The first step in this development approvals process for the property owners is for the regional board to consider the site-specific floodplain exemption application for that reduction to the floodplain setback to Kootenay Lake. And as the Rural Affairs Committee know, that's consideration for the committee and the regional board. Then, should the board support the site-specific floodplain exemption, planning staff would continue with processing the watercourse development permit application for works within the riparian area of Kootenay Lake. In this case, that would be the footings related to the cantilever deck. And part of that process would include working with the archaeological branch and any impacted First Nations through that process. And as the Rural Affairs Committee knows, that particular application type has a delegated approval authority to our general manager.
Interesting process. Thank you.
On the fact that we've delegated the approving authority, that if the board wanted to be more engaged at the subsequent steps, then we could pull back on that delegated authority and say we want rural RAC to see that step as well. But
Chair?
what we've done now is we're kind of providing our input on what maybe in my mind is more of the hardship issues. Is there a reason, a hardship kind of related issue where we think there should be an exemption, but we haven't covered all the technical bases? We haven't covered all the, what will happen at building permit stage. We haven't covered all the, if ground is disturbed, we're not covering all of that. We're kind of more at the, is there a reason, a sort of hardship-based reason to let someone even consider venturing into this zone? And beyond that, a lot of the discussion will become very technical. We could ask to see that technical conversation and come back and have us look at it. I don't know what would add to it. Hopefully that's not a mischaracterization. Go ahead.
I just want to note, I apologize because I initiated this discussion and we veered well away from the motion itself, but I think it's warranted that there's a much deeper conversation to have around procedures. And so I would recommend we flag that and we don't derail from the motion at the table.
And it might be a very targeted, I will go to, in a second, Director Davidoff, a very targeted staff synopsis of how we track from A to B to C to D around this kind of thing where we see part of it for one reason and we don't see the rest of it for other reasons. Unless there's a building bylaw contravention, then full circle of life, we see it again. Is that good for this point in time?
I would agree with that. Okay. Thank you for that offering to the chair. And yes, it's all about expediency and understanding what our constituents have to go through. And if we're not aware of these things, we can't understand these things on their behalf.
Okay, and I wanted to loop back, Director Davidoff. Did you have something else to add before you maybe go to a vote?
Just a summative comment on something that the chair raised now, and that is delegated authority for development permits. When I first got on the board, Kelly, that's exactly what I asked. I says I didn't understand why, for example, we had a redevelopment plan of a sawmill in Area I, and that was not referred to back to us. The staff was going to make that decision, and I questioned that because it was complex. So here we have a similar situation where we're not going to get to see this again. It's going to be decided by the general manager, full stop. And that's the delegated authority piece that I think it's always bothered me from the first day I was on the board to now. Other stations and local governments, municipalities will approve development permit applications. We delegated that to the general manager. So we need to revisit this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. And it goes a little beyond the one individual you noted. Maybe CEO Harn, you could expand on that.
Yeah, through the chair, I just wanted to be careful about the word that you used, Director Davidoff, because the general manager doesn't make the decision. The reason it's been delegated is because there's very strict rules around the approval process and it has to meet all those conditions. And that's what the general manager has been delegated to do. There's no subjectivity in the decision to do that. It's not something where you consider different elements and then the general manager makes a decision. It has to meet certain criteria and it's laid out very specifically. And if it doesn't meet that, it doesn't get approved. If it does, it gets approved. So I just want to make sure that there's no delegation of a subjective decision-making that's been made here by the Rural Affairs Committee.
And in my mind, that's where I use the word, is sort of becomes more of a technical process. Tick the boxes, it will or will not fit. So interesting and good conversation, I guess, right in the middle of a recommendation. Any other discussion on the content of the recommendation? Seeing none, on this recommendation to approve the site-specific floodplain exemption. All in favor? Any opposed? So that carries, and that will go to the board tomorrow. I think this is why I mentioned to our delegates in the room that it's unpredictable where we will be at any point in time as we move ahead. However, right now, we are at item 7.8 in OCP and zoning bylaw amendments. This is in electoral area I, TSL developments. We have Jordan Bear in the room on this application. There's a staff recommendation to go to first and second reading and public hearing on both of those bylaws. And then, of course, the appointing the individual to chair the meeting, the public hearing. So if you want, you could come forward, you could add information beyond what's in the report, or just answer questions. The floor is yours, Jordan.
Through the chair, interesting discussion. As a developer, it's interesting to go through some of them. But I wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff for a thorough reporting on this application. And thank you to the board for hearing it. And I'm here to answer questions.
So on that point, committee members, questions for the applicant? Don't see any, none from Director Davidoff online, so that's pretty straightforward. As they say, there's some variability in how these move forward, so if you wouldn't mind stepping back again. So we have 3 recommendations. We're in committee, we can move them as a block. Or we can have discussion or questions for staff. Chair Watson.
Chair, I'd like to move the first two recommendations. I can't move the third, and if it's seconded, then I'd like to open.
Okay. Okay, we'll go that way. To move the first, second recommendations. Go ahead, Director Davidoff.
Yes, I urge the committee members to support these recommendations. We had a very fulsome discussion on this application at our APHC and had our questions answered. So that is a really good process for us to use. And I actually hope and wish and hope that we get more applications referred to APHC, because we actually assisted in the process by asking the questions that probably would be asked here or may not be asked here. And I trust that the applicant feels the same way. It's not a question because obviously the applicant can't answer right now, but the key thing is that that's what we do at APHC. And our APHC has some members have served for over 30 years on the APHC. So the key thing is I urge you to support these 2 recommendations, and then I will respectfully request someone else to move the third one, because I'm in a conflict. I can't.
Thank you, Director Davidoff. Any further discussion? I guess it's good to see a property going to a productive use, which is nice to see. Seeing no further discussion on the first 2 recommendations, all in favor? Anyone opposed? So those are carried, and we'll go to the board tomorrow. On the other recommendation, Chair Watson, move the recommendation. We have a second discussion. Pick somebody else. That's my bad humor of the day. So that's Director Davidoff would chair the public hearing. All in favor? And that goes to board as well tomorrow. So thanks for coming in as well today, and the board will see this all tomorrow.
Yeah, Chair, I'm privileged. I love you too.
Yeah. Item 7.9 is a Crown referral license of occupation for utilities. I find this kind of an interesting topic in general. Zach, I guess this is your report. Do you want to give us a little bit of I don't know if I've quite seen one like this before. Yes, that's right. Now, Isaac is online as well from the Gasol Infinite Society. It's not really I guess I could ask, go ahead, Isaac. Did you want to make any comments about how this impacts your ability to provide service, internet service? Or is that-
Absolutely.
Sure, go ahead, Isaac.
If you don't mind, I'll, Kaslo Infonet Society has a submarine backbone running from Ainsworth up the west side of Kootenay Lake and terminating at Johnson's Landing. That's how we provide internet service to the communities along that stretch from Lardo, Argenta, Johnson's Landing. This project, or rather set of projects, is to extend that backbone down from Johnson's Landing, landing at a number of boat access communities along the East Shore, eventually connecting back to the Columbia Basin Broadband Corporation in Belfour. And then a separate line is extending down into the south body of the lake past Pilot Point to connect at a number of areas along the shoreline before hitting Boswell. From there, we connect a little bit further down south to a second Columbia Basin broadband point of presence, which allows us multiple points of redundancy off of our network. So in the unlikely event of an anchor strike or a submerged log or something catching that underwater cable and pulling on it, having that physical redundancy in the lake means that there would be no outage for any of our subscribers. From this project in the lake, the goal for us is twofold: to create that redundancy and also to land at a number of points to build out last mile fiber to provide direct customer support services. So there's two projects that are sort of part of this. One is a Connecting Communities BC broadband project. And that's for essentially RDCK Area D with the transit line going down to Belfour. We have a separate project from the RDCK to connect up a number of facilities within RDCK Area A. And so the landing sites at Ryandel and in Boswell will allow us to connect the 3 RDCK facilities in Ryandel, the water treatment, fire hall, and community center, and the waste transfer facility in Boswell.
Great, thanks for that. I have a few people with questions, and I maybe will put myself in the end because I want you to talk about pole rental costs at some point as the alternative to this. But questions from Watson, Cunningham, Graham, and maybe myself. Go ahead, Chair Watson.
Thank you. I just wanted to note, and I may have said this to the committee before, but we do so much it bears repeating. Ken has been the only source of stable communications for the north end of Kootenay Lake. When I first moved back to Castle from Meadow Creek, Tavis told me the parking lot was full and I had no internet options. I had used my mobile data for my first year of being an elected official. Ken at that time had just come into the community I was in, and I went from expensive mobile data, internet services to Ken being reliable. Further to that, what has been most prominent as director is that the north end of Kootenay Lake does not have cell service. It constantly uses their phone lines because the power goes out so frequently. And they're old copper lines, which, by the way, I've sent several messages to tell us regarding their call to copper lines, and I've heard no responses. That's not the point of right now. The point of right now is when we lose our power and we no longer have phone lines for communication for a large part of our geography, it's Ken Internet that remains and how people communicate. They're also working with the local nonprofit Society Links, who does a lot of my communications as well, similar to your newsletter, Director Graham, that's why I was looking at you. And they're creating void centers at certain crossroads because there's so much adventure tourism up there, and also people needing self-service, which is not available. So Isaac knows this because we get to chat and I don't have my camera on, you don't see me looking at you, Isaac. But I funded Kin quite a bit over the years because they are the most reliable telecommunications. And I just can't thank them enough for being a service provider that actually knows the people. And when the power goes out, they're the first ones to respond. They are up on their skis, they're going up to those towers, they're figuring it out, they're working with locals. And I swear they are the template of which I wish other service providers would follow in terms of community care. So sorry, Isaac, I had to boost you up there, but essentially we would be in the dark without Kin for communication. So, and I'm grateful that they've discovered ways to be super innovative that does not break the bank. I know there's a lot of money involved in this, but compared to the other telecommunications that have just said no flat out because it's never going to make a business proposal, Kin has figured out very unique ways of being able to do this. And I would just say that CBBC and Kin. CBBC did not set the way they're doing this. It was Kin who originated it. So for originality, way to go, Kin. And obviously I support this application.
And no questions, but I won't question. Director Cunningham.
Thank you. To the staff, the comment was made about crossing the lake. I know probably be half a dozen crossings of the lake back and forth, but the sound of things eventually. When a line gets hooked and broken, this whole line need to be replaced, or is it possible to pull up the sections to repair it? I know that you can do it with copper cable, but I don't know if you can do it with fiber optic. Any answer with regards to that? I realize that it's very unlikely, but however, it does happen.
Well, it does happen. It hasn't happened to us, but we are sort of prepared for that. Part of the reason why we choose to do as many landing sites as we are is in order to avoid splicing underwater. So the main point of failure on a cable is where multiple cables are connected together. And so that has to be secure. There's splice boxes, et cetera. Those areas, when there's tension on them, are the most likely point of failure. And so our methodology is to land every 10 kilometers or so along the surface as our cables come along 12 kilometer long spools. This allows us to avoid any underwater splicing. The cable itself is run along the bottom of the lake, which is quite deep. It's a very deep lake, and near the shoreline, it's protected inside a flexible iron pipe. So anchor strikes, et cetera, nobody really has a 100-meter anchor line on Kootenay Lake, so we're not really worried about the unprotected cable. If it was struck, though, we do have plans essentially to take that cable out of the lake. But our repair methodology is to run another cable immediately versus trying to find that break on the bottom of the lake and fix it there.
Thank you, Chair. I was reminded of the first transatlantic cable that broke someplace in the mid-Atlantic. And so the whole cable was abandoned from one end to the other. I would hate to think of something. Of course, this is only Kootenay Lake, only a few kilometers, and I like the idea of the 10-kilometer landing and extension. I think the designs sound very practical.
It is built-in redundancy. Director Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So through the chair, I just have a question, I guess, and also regarding your methodology. You're saying you're not going to be digging up the shoreline, so that's great. So how do you get this cable through this conduit? I'm assuming there's a vault somewhere on shore, and you've got a diver. There's a lot of cables in Balfour at this site. There's the TELUS, the Shaw, there's this one, there's a lot of cables going on there. And I'm just wondering, how do you get this? I'm assuming you built the conduit big enough to accommodate another cable, and just how does that work?
Right. So in Balfour specifically, we're not planning on doing any shoreline work. The CBBC has basically the same methodology as us already in place in Balfour. And so the way that we're able to add additional capacity is by pulling basically a fish tape or a pull tape through the conduit and metal piping that's already in place, which is several inches wide. The cables that we use are tiny, effectively. So there is still room within the CBBC's infrastructure eventually it might run out, but the room is there for us to effectively pull that cable through using divers on the one end into the conduit and existing infrastructure to connect with their POP there.
Yeah, so,
further, yes.
so through the chair, there's also a water intake right in that area as well that you might want to be aware of when you're doing some work in the vicinity.
Absolutely. And so I don't know if it's mentioned in the report at all, but several of our key staff for this project work directly with the CBBC on that first installation. So we have a few people that are probably as familiar with the CBBC as to what's in place there as possible. So we're going to make all efforts to effectively not raise any sediment near the water intake.
Thank you.
For the first time, I'm just going to interject my impossible to answer question. What would the cost be for pole rental over the lifespan of this anticipated lifespan of this marine cable if you had to hang your cable on TELUS poles? And don't try and answer that because you know it's just not a thing. Every time we've talked about it, it's not a thing. So for the second time, Director Watson, Chair Watson.
Well, two notes just through to you and through to Director Graham. First to Director Graham, it was a really long report, but they included, I believe it was in their submission for Kin, they included the methodology for each site. And I found it extremely thorough, so you can maybe take a look at that. You probably did, it's hard to remember everything. But they noted the water system, they noted all the things, and I was like, wow, Balfour's really busy right there with my outcome, but they had a pretty good methodology. And then I would just say if we were to cost out the cost of poles, that include loss of power when those get knocked down.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Sure, Director Vandenberg, and then we'll go to what Zach is looking for. Go.
Does Anthony not have his hand up?
Oh, sorry, Director Davidoff, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah.
Were you just pointing that out? Director Davidoff, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Chair. So Isaac, really neat application. We had two gas lines go under water, right, instead of overhead. One in near Sure Acres and one in Brilliant. I guess again for safety reasons and everything else. And the overhead lines, had a bridge and everything, but that infrastructure was all taken down. So the underwater seems, hey, if it can work across the Atlantic, it probably work across Kootenay Lake. I have one personal comment that I cannot resist. You have a doppelganger in Castlegar. Do you know George Apel? You sound like him. You look identical to him. So just, I don't know, maybe your twin brother is long lost. I have no idea, but you really look and sound exactly like my friend George in Castlegar. So just thought I couldn't resist noting that.
And that's another question you don't have to answer.
I just want to quickly touch on the, that's quite interesting to know that though. I will quickly touch on the pole rentals. We don't have an exact cost of what they are. It would actually be in the order of millions over the length of this project. Several millions of dollars to rent the poles for just connecting Ryandell is about a 40-kilometer stretch, and over a 20-year period, that would probably push about $2 million just in pole rental fees. And so one of Kin's methodologies is to effectively absorb a lot of the costs up front. And our process, most of those costs are labor, and our laborers are all local. And so rather than paying $2 million to TELUS to go off to Calgary or Toronto or wherever, we're going to pay a few $100,000 to locals. That's going to stay in the local economy.
And we do appreciate that. Director Vandenberg, did you have a question? Yes.
Yes, I do have a question. And thank you to the chair. First of all, this is very interesting. And this really comes to light because not too long ago we had a town hall in our local community, concerns around a tower going up by Rogers, that particular presenter referred to the Caswell project as a alternative way of delivering mobility and data services. And now we're talking about it here today, so it's making a further connection for me. So my point is that this is good information to come to this table for the directors, even if it's just for your information. I think it's great information. But my question is around, how is it that Front Counter BC is the entity that gets it into our agenda? I don't understand that the way that works. Is this is being referred to as information, presumably through Front Counter BC? I don't understand that right.
It's an opportunity, I guess, if you read Zach's letter, to provide additional input. The only input I can provide but I haven't really got there yet, is this is the only cost-effective way to do this. We've got nothing but rock. You go up the East Shore. You're not going to trench. You can't get in the highway. We can't even get water lines in the highway. And it's just not practical in so many areas. So this is a cost-effective solution to getting reliable internet. But Zach has answered most of the technical points to do with zoning, everything else. Do we want to add anything to his letter, I think is the question.
And supplemental information, and I appreciate that, but that's not my point. My point is how is this delivered to us, to Zach, by Front Counter BC? How is that? How are they in this process for us to take advantage of this conversation today?
To see if there's any land use implications, I would think, is why our staff had received it. Chair Watson, any other thoughts?
My understanding of your question is the procedure in which, how do we get referrals and why is this going through Front Counter and not?
Yes.
And so the land that they are going to be impacting is Crown land.
Primarily.
So it's an application to the Crown land, which is Front Counter BC is the method for that. And so when that occurs, any land use applications such as forestry, the siting towers for cell phones, we see those on referral because we have land use regulations that could be implicated. And because we have a say in local land use development, zoning, not zoning, depending on that. So the referral process is because it's not an application on private land where we would be the general applicant. Sorry, we would be the recipient of an application. It's on Crown land.
Okay, thank you. I didn't.
Okay. That's what I thought you were getting at.
Slow to the uptake, so
no problem.
Make that connection.
It's similar when we get an application and we refer it out to all the other agencies that might be interested. We have multiple jurisdictions in one area at times. Sorry, Chair.
Oh, that's good. That wraps it nicely. So we have, Zach hasn't said a whole lot, but we have a pretty comprehensive summary of, what's what or who's who, where we have zoning, where we have any potential impacts from our side. And to me, do we want to add anything to this? Or just we direct the board direct staff to respond, and there's a pretty comprehensive response to the letter dated March 1st. Anyone want to move that recommendation, and we can have a conversation about the content of it, or Director Cunningham?
Chair.
Do we have a second? Second.
Will we see the responses before we send to Front Counter, or just automatic?
If we ask. You're saying if we ask Zach to amend the letter or add something to it, I guess we would do that here and now. Is that what you're looking for, Zach?
Yeah, and through the chair, I would think that there is some opportunity to, provide supplemental comments after this, specifically for directors for areas A, D, and E. Or if any other directors have an interest or specific comments, but certainly there is like a draft, and my expectation was that there would be a bit of a discussion at this meeting. I've certainly been doing my best to take some notes about some of the discussion points that have arisen, but it is made difficult to on the fly kind of think about how the letter will be amended. So I would certainly be open to receiving comments after this meeting as well to the directors that are affected by this referral.
And that'd probably be the cleanest approach to take, because you've covered off virtually everything to do with land use. And we could provide additional information. We have the motion on the floor. Director Watson, go ahead. Chair Watson.
I actually skipped right over the note on additional comments because I'm just in favor of the report, but you can add in how grateful we are for kin services in our region. And thank you for being so thorough with your application.
If I'm going to editorialize here a little bit, I wouldn't say that we're grateful for an outfit. I would maybe recognize they're providing a cost-effective solution, which maybe you might be grateful for, but that's the fact of it. This is cost-effective, this approach. But I don't know if that's something that we can easily work into the letter. Were you hoping to add something? Do we want to add, comment for following month or something like that to have a follow-up letter?
I'm sincerely totally fine with the application, and the letter that Zach has drafted is great. I'm beefing it up to say that I think they are great, but that is not necessary from a procedural perspective. Front Counter doesn't look at things on its subjective matter of fabulousness.
Yes.
But we note it. So I'm not concerned with Zach's letter. Everything in there is fine with me. I have no opposition, obviously.
Any other discussion then on essentially what would end up being the recommendation to put this letter forward? Any other discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? Okay, so thanks, Zach. You've captured everything, and thank you, Isaac, for giving us a little more background. Some of us have been looking at this for a few years, so no, if you can finish it this summer, that'd be great. That's it. We have nothing under environmental services. There's a fireworks discussion which might go for a while, and then public time, then in camera. I think if nothing else, we better get up and stretch for a few minutes.
Sure.
Yes.
Through the chair, while you're on break, was in the room. Jason McDermott cooked some donuts today.
Oh, that's great.
So Jason's heritage, he's from a First Nations community in the Yukon.
Yes.
And those are traditional donuts from his community that he cooked this morning for staff, and there's a lot left over. I brought some in.
Cool. So I've got 10:13. What if we go till 10:25? Does that feel on? 10:20.
Not at all.
You know what I missed?
We'll go 10:25. Get a bit of a decent stretch.
In like.
Where are things?
I'm just getting your question answered. Those three questions you had on the budget. Joe, contractual services from Arts. But I'll send them to you. They're pretty straightforward. The fire one, that was all 2024 capital expenditures, so that, and there's zero capital budget 25 to 28, so it makes sense. There's no reserves financing. Yeah, for essential resource recovery, every year, at the end of the year, we have to book the liability for landfills and HB, all of our resource recovery stuff. It's a non-cash entry, which throws off our cash budgets. All of our budgets are based on cash. It drives me crazy from the auditor's perspective because you're taking this one accrual entry, you're messing up something that has to be on a cash basis. So that's why that huge $7 million is in there. If you notice, it doesn't carry forward because we do the budget on a cash basis. And at the end of the year, they'll make us book it again. It gets recorded on a consolidated basis, but we don't fund it through taxation on an annual basis. So it's not like we're looking for a $2 million tax fund to cover the whole that we've got in the service. So it's one of those accounting things that we've got these cash budgets, and then we take an accrual entry that we do on a consolidated basis, and they make us put it through a service to account for it. So you'll see it in West Resource Central and East. Yeah. No, it's not cash. It's not cash basis.
And so like anything that just would have tried talking about, and I'm going like, I have no idea. I should have some.
Yeah, but that's what it is. It's all accrual based. We don't fund the liability. We're consistently doing work to get liability reduced. And I'm just waiting on parts. Carrie's out of the office this week, so Joe's trying to get back to me.
Yeah, that was like that all the time.
Yeah.
Some of them are.
Well, there isn't much. I could probably get a snapshot from the budget with the notes.
Okay.
Because we have a work order for tag of Morning Mountain, Sunshine. Like we've got a work order for each park. And then you can see what's in there with the notes at the end, whether it's janitorial, some improvements.
I mean, like just even for my own, sort of like,
Yeah.
I just kind of like, okay, these are a few things that are just kind of popping up.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people don't quite realize that as soon as you put a garbage can there,
I know it's got.
it costs money. If you watch it in a park, it costs money. Yeah.
So I was, I know what like some of it is, but I just didn't know how I started to like, I don't change one.
Yeah.
But that's why I didn't want to ask tonight.
Yeah.
I just figured if you guys could just, read my email and I don't have to make some.
Yeah, I can, all good. I'm just waiting on Joe, but I'll get you those.
It's not like I need it for tomorrow.
Right.
I just need it to, but I'm a city resident. You know, it's not for that point.
Yeah.
Having the fun of the record experience. Good to see you, Jim.
Be good?
Oh, yeah. You know, I used to just like, just felt like I needed to ask the gym for their name.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
What happened was when council replied all and it canceled everyone's. But yeah, I did reply to you. Saying that it wasn't.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, a couple people thought that, SCM and.
Oh, I thought it was.
Yeah, you replied on that was something else. Okay.
Oh, is that what that was doing when he answered those emails? Yeah. Everybody's. Oh. Yeah. Oh, I see.
Now I'm, yeah, you weren't the only one. We're kind of, what's going on. I think and the same thing happened.
Yeah, it's not resolved.
But thank you for listening. Are we?
We are not muted.
Oh, no, I don't feel like I.
Oh, everybody's ear off.
Okay, we are at 25 past, a fairly good break. If everybody takes their seat, we'll get back underway.
Sure was good.
That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Now. I'll check with you after.
Okay,
Be tired.
so we left off at 9.1. Rural admin discussion item fireworks. Director Vandenberg requested a discussion. As Director Hanegraaff just said, let there be fireworks, let there be light by firework. This topic has gone around a few times, but we'll let you open, Director Vandenberg. What are you hearing from community? What are your concerns right now?
Thank you, through the chair. This is just a high degree of common sense. So I'll start with a preamble that the season last year between April 1st and October 31st, 2,245 wildfires burned more than 2.8 million hectares of forest land. Of the 2,245 wildfires, 72% were natural cause, 25% were human caused. And then 3% is still to be determined. A lot of that was to do with lightning strikes, which last year was slightly above the 20-year average of 265,000 lightning strikes. This comes from the BC's website. There were 60 wildfires designated as wildfires of note. Wildfires resulted in 208 evacuation orders affecting 24,000 properties and roughly 48,000 people. An estimated 386 evacuation alerts were affected, approximately 62,000 properties for roughly 137,000 people. They don't have a report summary on the structures yet implicated. But the amount of cost towards wildfire suppression stands now at $817 million. So the common sense that I have in mind is I would like to talk about the process, the procedure, desire to ban fireworks in RDCK during fire season, with or without a special permit requirement, and that's remains to be seen. But to me, it's fireworks. Are a very touchy and possibly uncontrolled, or I guess fireworks is a simpler way for us to control the amount being wildfire proactive. And so I think I would just like to leave it at there and invite some conversation.
Go to CEO first.
So through the chair, this, as Dr. Jackman or Chair Jackman had mentioned, this has kind of made its rounds before. And the reason it kind of fizzled away was because of the provincial restrictions around fireworks during fire season. And they're becoming much more, in my opinion, they're becoming much more conservative as to when they implement that stage 2 restriction. And as soon as they implement that stage 2, fireworks are banned. So that would essentially trump our bylaw during fire season. And it would limit us to essentially shoulder season work if you wanted to extend it out. But in the last couple of years, you know, they've had it on as early May and on until almost Halloween in terms of that requirement. So that's where it kind of fizzled out last time. So I guess just maybe to frame the conversation around what you were looking for scope, because enforcement is always our biggest issue when it comes to anything to do with bylaw, and Jordan's in the room and he can definitely speak to that. So that was where things landed last time, was leaving it to the province to make sure that they're putting that restriction as soon as they feel it's appropriate.
Thank you for that. I wasn't completely aware of that, and the context is important. And yeah, enforcement is that part of it that's would need to be discussed. So is the province then. How do you report infractions if it's under provincial control?
Through the chair, Jordan has that answer in terms of whether it's the CO.
Maybe, yeah, we'll go to Jordan, and then we have Directors Hanegraaff, Cunningham, and Watson following up. But sure, whether the conservation officers, RAP line, whatever mechanisms.
Yeah, through the chair. As CEO has indicated.
Oh, yeah, you might want to come and sit closer so that I'll pick you up, Jordan.
Yeah, during category 2 open fires, as the CO has indicated, there are prohibitions included within those orders that prohibit setting off fireworks, and then of course enforcement would happen through the statutes related to that kind of activity through the Ministry of Forests. So then, yes, the RAP has report all poachers and polluters, has an online complaint submission portal similar to our own. So you can report fireworks violations, and then of course they would be investigated by, they have fire wardens that they hire to make patrols. They can issue tickets, and then certainly NROs, natural resource officers, can as well.
Well, we just go through speaker list, I guess, as it sits here. Hanegraaff, Cunningham, Watson. Go ahead, Director Hanegraaff.
The risk of sounding like a cranky old fun police, I'm gonna say that I'd like to see them gone all year round. I'm dealing with a problem now where a guy's just tormenting his neighbors by setting off fireworks, and it's always right before the noise bylaw comes into effect. People's horses get upset, people's dogs get it. And it's not good for the fireworks aren't good for the environment. I'd like to see a full-on firework ban, and if that makes me the fun police, so be it. But they serve no purpose, and they're dangerous.
So is there a staff comment on the ability to ban them outright?
Through the chair. So fireworks are regulated actually through the Fireworks Act. However, which ban fireworks exclusive basically of Halloween, ban the sale, ban the use. However, the province downloads the responsibility to local governments to enact a bylaw around. So I'll specifically say the act applies to a municipality or rural area designated by regulation that declares that this act applies. So we would first have to have something within the regional district to a bylaw to that effect, as I just read. I will say that from my, chatting with my team, that in the last 2.5 years, we can remember 3 complaints that we have received for fireworks. And of course, I'm also aware of your situation there, which is a kind of bit of an escalated neighbor dispute that involves, serious assault and other activities, and that's just a small component of it. But yeah, so we would need our own bylaw in order to bring provincial bylaw into effect. And then you get into the enforcement. What's our capacity to enforce this? We would, like for 3 calls a year, it doesn't make sense to me that we alter the complete setup of our bylaw team to be able to go out and respond right when these are occurring. So that would then mean that we'd have to respond after the fact on witness evidence in order to be able to secure a conviction if we were issued that bylaw.
Further?
Yeah, no, and I get that with my particular situation, if fireworks were banned, it would be a chainsaw that's running until, closing time or whatever. But I am concerned about fire. People behaving badly, what can I say? But I am concerned about the fire aspect. I think it's overwhelming.
Director Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. Selma, of course, has fireworks for July 1st. And fireworks in Selma, and also in Weimar, we set off fireworks from time to time. But if you're set off by a certified professional, they have to be certified. You can't just go buy the really wonderful things just at your corner store. You have to be a certified firework professional. And of course, it's reasonably rigorous, because last thing that happened in Selma last year, even, we kept everybody with ballpark way. Well, one of the fireworks from rocket flipped over as it took off and went, and yeah, it was only 30, 40 feet in the air when it went over the crowd. So there are dangers there, and they have to be done by a professional. The rest of the time, sorry, they're outlawed technically, because unless you're a professional, you shouldn't be setting up fire. No, I mean, and if you know it, well, It's still not, it's not legal.
Thanks for comments. We have Watson, Weatherhead, and then I have a few points. Go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of notes. One is I just kind of want to bring it back to what I believe Director Vandenberg's initial points were, which is we have a lot of human-caused fires. We're associating that with fireworks, which is part of it, but I think there's a lot of other elements to it. So I don't want to lose sight of what you're raising here, which is really critical. I think fireworks is only one component. I think given the bans, once we hit that level, the firework component of igniting fires is quite minimal. And if you are found to do that, my understanding is the penalties are quite heavy during a ban. So I think there's other things to address that are not fireworks that are actually causing a lot of these fires. One of them is, of course, cigarettes. If you're caught throwing a cigarette out of a car during that time, there's also a heavy fine, but not everybody's caught, but it is the cause of what the major Rock Creek fire was a couple of years ago. The other one is the, talk about being a fun place, all these people I name are gonna think I'm talking about them, or all these actions. The other one is ATVs in the forest. The forest companies tend to shut down because the risk of fire becomes so significant. But that doesn't shut down adventure tourism. And that becomes one that for consistent 3 summers now has become an issue in my area, is the ability as an adventure tourism person to still go out and have vehicles running in extremely flammable situations. So that's another one. And then there was actually a YRV blade on a truck that started a fire up by New Denver at that time. So I think it's important to acknowledge the issue you're raising is critical, but it's not one thing causing it. There are multiple things causing those fires, and how do we address those? Can we address those? And when it comes specific to fireworks, I have not had any complaints, but I will note they are going off at all times a year. There was some this week that someone thought was a gunshot, but the way they were going, I could tell they were fireworks. And I don't know why. But they are occurring. I'm not super keen on the firework approach, mostly because it's not an issue in my area, but I am super keen on what are causing all these fires and how do we address that from a human cost perspective. So I think it merits more exploration. My last comment is I don't know where it was, but someone had indicated that fire wardens are no longer, and they definitely are in Area D. My fire warden is who is watching for those during a ban, who is responding to campfires that are ignited at the wrong time of year. They are very diligent in Area D. So I'm not sure where it was indicated that they can no longer, but I'm a very active fire warden, and I'm super grateful because my fire service is very, very limited. So long-winded, sorry, last comment, community wildfire resiliency plans make several recommendations on how to manage fires that the regional district can take action on. And so there's quite a few things in there that could be things we look at. I'll also note that some of the recommendations are not aligned with what we can do, such as actually managing fire bans themselves. We don't have that provision as far as I know. Bit long-winded, sorry about that.
Oh, thanks for your input. We have Weatherhead, Graham, and then myself. Go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. I just found it interesting about the fire ban. I was not actually aware of fireworks being banned by the province at that time. And you mentioned also, Stuart mentioned the how early our fire ban started last year, and yet we have fireworks in the summer. You know, it was, and so I just wondered what were we supposed to what was supposed to take place, maybe did not take place in our region. I don't really know, but I know they do set off our fireworks in the village of Belfast on the water, but I don't know if it made any difference. But you know, that's just a bit concerning, thinking, that's funny, because nothing stopped our July 1st fireworks. And were we already on fire ban at that point in time? I do recall we were. So, yeah, so maybe is there a disconnect maybe to some people about these provincial, some areas that don't realize there's these provincial laws in place?
To respond on that, sure, go ahead, Director Cunningham.
I know the village of Selmo actually has their fireworks. They buy the fireworks for the celebration, and I think we can in the village. They do have the right to relax the ban for the community.
Really?
But I mean, but
That's
all
what this
around,
is
so
too,
there's
yeah.
no trees around that gets fire,
Well, that's
a mile.
still kind of concerning because we're setting the precedence that there's a threshold.
Okay, point well taken though, that not everyone's under the same rules necessarily. Director Graham.
Thank you. So through the chair, I'm just trying to get some clarification on, like, if we get a complaint, I live in Balfour, so we do have some fireworks issues, and I did have a situation, I think it was about a year ago, where like people were phoning me because last night somebody had fireworks, and those particular individuals were from Alberta. They probably brought them with them, so it wouldn't, even if we did ban them, it might not stop them from bringing them. But my question through the chair to staff is, like, who responds? Like, if you get a complaint at the regional district for fireworks, like, who goes to?
So, one complaint from electoral area E that we received in the last year, and it was with regards to a planned fireworks demonstration, sorry, through the chair.
Yes.
Presentation at Sunshine Bay, I think, Regional Park. So we arranged for staff to be able to attend that event, and there was some phone calls made to the person who had scheduled it. In the end, the event didn't happen. Currently, anybody in the RDCK can go to our website and submit a complaint through the online portal, and it would be investigated by the bylaw officer who's assigned to electoral area. And because we're not attending at the moment to say, oh yeah, I saw it, we're dependent upon acceptance to support any first action that we need to take.
So just supplemental, just like, so through the chair to staff, so do the fire department, the Balfour Fire Department, for example, would like not go to a fireworks call, or do they go?
I really can't speak to what their protocol is, but generally if it's a complaint, if somebody calls the RDCK to complain about fireworks, they're probably going to get, to the bylaw enforcement team as opposed to the fire department. But that might vary, perhaps in a smaller area, when Director Cunningham was, there's fireworks, and there might be a call placed that way for somebody to, who's active with the volunteer fire department. But right now the calls would come to us.
So through the chair, so the one that I do remember, like, I thought Pat went to that, Pat Hergott, our chief, our fire chief. So I'm just wondering if the complaints are being directed to the fire calls directly from residents. And I'm wondering if the regional district has a role in terms of communicating with residents on where to send their fireworks complaints if they happen. And also further to what Director Weatherbeck was saying, if the regional district should be communicating with residents to let them know when the fireworks bans are on.
Or the burn bans. Maybe we will take advantage of a bit of Director Cunningham's experience, because you can call in an unauthorized fire in a fire service area in the rural areas, and my experience is the chiefs will respond. I don't know if fireworks is not unauthorized fire.
This way, if I had a fireworks complaint, I'd say, you guys should be calling 911, because when you call 911, they will say police, ambulance, fire. And you say fireworks, they will call the police on your behalf, we have to respond, because it's illegal, it's in the wrong time of the year, and they're the ones who are protecting the related charges. And also, of course, if it's thought to be a problem with the fire, they can also tell the fire department. It takes it beyond it. It's not up to the director to just make these decisions. It's up to the people who know these things.
That is a good point. I know the Wendell Fire Chief had responded directly to calls years back, but your mechanism will maybe double up on the response depending on the nature.
You just tell them what the problem. They're setting off fires, and I'm worried it's going to be okay. And you would like us to call the police, and you'd like us to let the fire department know as well.
I'm going to hold off on my couple of comments because go to Director Hanegraaff on this sort of loop.
I find it interesting because.
Oh, and Maine, I see was. Thank you. Go ahead. Carry on.
Knows when the fire ban goes on. It's never occurred to me that a fireworks ban would go on in conjunction with the fire ban. I learned something here today. I find that interesting. And I think it needs to be better publicized.
Like Chair, I can, it is on the notices, they send out the post everywhere. It includes burning barrel, and fireworks is in that list.
But you know, when you see the big things, it's always, no fires, fireworks just never occurred to me.
So we will loop back through Director Main. Wanted to, and I would value her comments. Again, she's in a municipality and maybe there are some different practices there. Director Main, please weigh in.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this matter. I absolutely echo Director Cunningham's remarks that you should be phoning 911. Do not phone your local fire chief. They have enough to do as volunteers without pitting them against potentially neighbors who are setting off fireworks, which pose a theoretical threat, not an actual threat of fire at the time that you'd be calling them. Secondly, fireworks, as do other forms of wildlife, do not recognize municipal boundaries, nor do they recognize regional district boundaries. Fireworks that are set off in the regional district local area outside of Silverton, if they're close enough, they can land in Silverton. Their empty shells can land in, and the noise obviously affects Silverton and vice versa. Silverton Community Club on July 1st traditionally has a fireworks show that they set off down on the beach in Silverton. So whose jurisdiction is that? It's below high water, it's out over the lake. There are a number of things to consider. The province has much better resources to deal with these things than we do. So phone 911, advocate toward the province. And thirdly, if this discussion comes around again and or goes into any further detail about it, please include the municipalities in these discussions, because it will be affecting us directly, even if the particular bylaw that you wish to pass, it does not hold sway within our municipalities. It's really a complex question, and we should let the enforcement be done by those with more resources than we have. Thank you very much.
And I do thank you for bringing up that over the years, we've looked at certain topics. We'll go so far, but before we take any hard action, it is appropriate to either make it a board conversation. And it's very difficult to have this kind of conversation at board, or we invite municipal directors. Sometimes we include stipend and expenses, depending on the depth of conversation. If what we do will have a direct impact on them. I'm going to make a few of my comments. I know there's always this celebratory Canada Day type thing. So just for information, Crescent Valley Services Committee, there's a group approached us about Canada Day celebrations. We said, look into a laser light show, not fireworks. Even though it may be, well-contained, big concrete or asphalt parking lot, a lot of green space, a lot of, buffer, if you want to look at it that way. We said, well, look at the light show. They said they're expensive, but I think we might find a migration towards that kind of thing. Have you been to any good rock concerts like Pink Floyd in the 70s, 80s? Anyway, you know how good light shows can be. The push-pull I get all the time is the fire during part of the year, but disturbance to animals through the rest of the year. And that's probably on balance. That's the most complaints I get. Maybe, Jordan, you don't see them because directors probably throw my hands up if it's over the phone or by email and say, we're not going to get very far on this unless you want to be a witness. You want to say the noise was unreasonable. The noise occurred at this time. You want to be documented and stuff like that. Then I think that's why they never phone bylaw, because they don't want to go to that extent. They just want someone to show up and firsthand. And so enforcement is the entire issue. I'm wondering, not today, if down the road we would think about whether or not we could say that this act is now in force and fireworks shall be set off by authorized persons or under this or that. Not that the board is going to necessarily adopt that, but that to me would be a starting point. That we have no authority right now unless we say this act that Jordan explained to us will be in effect and here are the conditions. To draft that, that's a new item on the work plan for something that's you know, it's got a lot of different directions it could play. So I don't think we're looking to give staff any direction today. How or if we bring it back, I guess that's pretty open-ended right now. Do we bring it back?
Thanks for the fourth or fifth time. We do have a noise bylaw. You're scaring animals. And the noise bylaw is very, so, we can still always, do something under that area. As far as fireworks, they are provincially regulated. You're supposed to be a professional to set them off, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that it's to our benefit at all to really go too much farther in this.
Yeah. Unless it's communication, if we could enhance or somehow direct people to fully understand what the fire ban means. Director Tierney, for the first time, then we go to Vandenberg, and Jordan has more to say. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, we found it interesting how small stores often have a large fireworks display. They must make good money selling those fireworks. And I do feel that it's a provincial issue during fire season, and we shouldn't be trying to force it. A lot of visitors from Alberta come to our area, and they don't know that you can't put on fireworks. And the store themselves are, they're not judging whether the people that are buying them are going to let them off that weekend or save them for the winter. So it would be, I think, advantageous if the province communicated with the sales people who are selling fireworks and try to regulate it somehow that the displays were clearly marked that they're to be used during the fire season, or else pull the fireworks from the shelf during a certain period of the year. But I do feel it's a provincial issue, not ours.
That would be like the cigarette thing. We allow sale of cigarettes, but with all kinds of notification. And that, I think, what took decades to come into place. And my apologies, editorializing a little bit. Director Vandenberg, you opened the question, and then I think Jordan might have some more.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Good conversation. Did learn a couple of things. To me, there's an opportunity to provide some education. I think that we're a little bit short on that when I type in fireworks to the RDC website. So for those people that are coming in, I would be of nature to type into the local governance fireworks to see what the restrictions are. So nothing is coming up. I think that Jordan's points ought to be framed and available to people so that they know what that means. Particularly, I mean, the number one industry is tourism. That means if people are coming in and they probably want to comply, but you've got to give them the opportunity to be able to understand what they can and cannot do. And so if we're missing that opportunity, I think that doesn't cost us anything to do. And I will say that I would like to see an annual ban on fireworks, unless it's special permit, which then requires a checklist of action. Because coming from even Flat Plains, Alberta, where we got lots of open spaces, my dogs and horses have taken a beeline to the fence many times when fireworks starts going off. It's not fun, and the noise is disruptive, and it's just not nice to your neighbors. It's disrespectful, and so I just think there's no need for it. Yes, Creston is going away from fireworks because that's the climate, if you will, we're in. So I would, and one day I would support a complete ban on them, but certainly our opportunity missed right now is to make sure that we've got appropriate information at the fingertips of anybody who cares to take the time to find out what's required in our backyards.
Jordan, you had a few more thoughts.
Excellent comments, and I will make sure that we have a little blurb on the bylaw enforcement page that provides some information around fireworks. It seems to me that there's a bit of a gap of communication that could be managed perhaps by the Ministry of Forests to, when there is a category to ban in place to specific mention, fireworks. The thing with any subject that's regulated on multi levels. Fireworks are, managed nationally by natural resources, so they get the signage in place. Would require dialogue between the provincial and federal governments. We really can't do anything unless we enact the bylaw. I have found a couple of examples from the island and regional districts. And in reading through their bylaws, we need to provide a mechanism where we identify a training process or a designated person. Because of course, by permitting the activity, what liability are we starting to take on? And I think noise, I agree. I don't like the idea of creating another bylaw to try and, it's a noise issue, and we'll continue and have investigated them as noise issues, but we are not getting those complaints. Now, if we want to, perhaps something on the website that mentions fireworks, if you have a concern, complete the online portal form that will give us facts that would be, this is or isn't an issue, so we should or shouldn't do something about it. So I think, that's a great suggestion. I'll make sure that gets on there. And I think, we create a bylaw, we start regulating things, there's going to be costs associated with that. I know that some regional districts charge either a $500 or a $100 application fee for a permit. And then they can also govern the sales, and perhaps the regional district may have the authority to put, some kind of a notice on a fireworks display, for sale kind of thing. But right now, 100% legal in regard ECK to sell fireworks. Thank you.
So thanks for that. And without formalizing it any further, I think that you've taken that as a direction to staff to actually look at the website and see how a search for fireworks would actually lead somewhere.
Yes.
And if that's sufficient, then that's step one.
Step one.
I don't know if we have any other steps that we can make without a specific staff work plan modification. Chair Watson.
Well, I don't want to discount the importance of what's being raised here. I do need to raise that we are not being cognizant of the current work plan for staff. And it's something that it's hard to do because if you haven't been here for 10 years, you might not recall everything, and reading the quarterly report isn't the most entertaining thing to do. But this would not be a top priority for me at this time, given what is currently on the planning and development services work plan. And I do not want us jumping and knee-jerking reactions based on current issues when previous issues have not been addressed. I'm not looking at Jordan saying he didn't do something. Sorry, I was just saying hi. Sorry, Jordan. But I'll likely raise it more as we move forward, that our staff work plans as directors, we are not being super cognizant of what we're adding to that plan and the time involved in completing it. So I would not prioritize this at this time, given the current work plan. That's just my statement.
And I haven't taken that we're putting anything more on staff other than maybe it's good to just try that search and see where that connection can be made.
Through the chair, it's a simple process to do this. No, that is anything that's in.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, supplemental.
Go ahead.
I think with our community wildfire resiliency plans and looking at the full breadth of things that are causing issues and what those recommendations are, those are professionals who have evaluated based on data on the landscape and the full breadth of what's happening with wildfires. Those recommendations, when we move to actions to address your initial point, is what we should be focusing on. Fireworks are some of that, but it's not the full picture. And so I would prioritize a review of our community wildfire resiliency plans when they're all completed and updated. We all have them, they're just being updated. To look at how do we address wildfires. I want us to stay focused on the issue, not necessarily the one mechanism that's causing them, would be my recommendation.
So I think we can move to the next item. But again, I think during the break, I heard a few comments. If we're going to have conversations, it has to be rural. It was just over 30 minutes, but there's some value to these conversations as they come up. What we'll go to is item 10 right now, public time, and this machine says it's 10:59 a.m. Is there anybody, there's nobody in the room as public, is there anyone online that would like to ask a question as public time? I guess Director Main, Leah Main of the public, do you have a question of this committee during public time?
Yes, as a member of the public, even more than as a municipal director, I do not understand the framework within you approve floodplain exemptions. And I will be down at board physically tomorrow. So if there are any, if Chair Jackman, you or any of the other rural directors can explain that to me in a one-on-one, I would really appreciate it. It seems to me that one-offing floodplain exemptions is going to lead us into a cumulative effects situation down the road. And with climate change being the way it is, even though our waters are receding right now, storms are increasing. And so there's increased danger to flood damage over the floodplain that I perceive, but maybe that is not within the framework that you judge those applications on.
So,
yeah,
not a question, of course, we can answer right now, how or why are we doing those? But I think the kind of outline or template that we might see coming back from Zach or Stephanie would be the best starting point. I don't think we'll have an answer tomorrow. Hardship is supposed to be a big part of that, the whole reason that step exists in our process. So yes, definitely, we will get back to you on how and why are we doing that. But can't answer it at the moment. Thanks for asking.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Valley Voice, Rachel, do you have any questions, or other members of the public? Any questions for this committee at this time? Not hearing any. We will then move on to.
Quick point of privilege as Valley Voice is on the line. I'm not sure if this was in the Valley Voice, but a local paper has printed that I resigned as chair. And I just like to acknowledge that I have not resigned as chair. I will see you in that seat tomorrow morning.
Maybe you're resigned to do the best job you can as chair.
Maybe that's what it is. I had 3 people stop me and congratulate me on my retirement, and I had no idea what they were talking about.
As rural chair, I continue to resign to be less editorial. So,
and I learned from
we may remain resigned.
So Chair, can I just ask you, is JRCC canceled this afternoon? Just wanted to confirm.
Correct. There's no joint resource. There is a Crescent Valley Services. If you have an open hour or two, you can join us.
No, thank you, Chair.
Thanks. We will now move to item 11. I'd like a resolution to close the meeting to the public. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Anyone opposed? And
I will
then
be leaving you at this time.
Yes, and Christine will manage that, and then motion, we will recess and reconvene. Who do we have? Are you ready to lock the meeting?
Yeah, I'm gonna expel.
Okay, yeah, members of the public could either drop off or
Get expelled.
administratively, it'll be done on this end. It's always nicer if you just leave the meeting. There's one left there, I see.